You know, I was thinking about something as I was sitting in the theater getting ready to watch another Disney live action remake. It occurred to me that I grew up in an era where whenever Disney wanted to re-release one of their animated classics on a new format, they would refer to that as them opening up the vault, and I'm sure you remember the advertisements. My point being, those movies felt protected based on the way that Disney presented them to us at the time. The bottom line being, these movies felt special. And every single time we get a new live-action remake of one of them, the aura that they once had slowly fades away. Something to think about. Let's discuss.
I watch so you don't have to.
Snow White takes refuge in the forest in the house of 7 dwarfs to hide from her evil stepmother. The queen is jealous because she wants to be known as the fairest of them all, to which Snow White currently has the honor of being. Okay, so right off the bat, I'm obviously not a huge Snow White fan. It is not one of the Disney animated classics that I grew up watching a lot. I have seen it, obviously, but it's been a very long time. So I figured it was going to be very difficult for me to make actual comparisons. Strangely enough, even with it having been a long time since I've seen the original, I was still able to very easily point out the differences between that movie and this remake. And I think I know the reason for that. Listen, the term modernization has kind of become an ugly word in the world of cinema. And that's not to say that a classic story can't be modernized in a satisfying way in the right hands. The problem is that modern Disney has proven many times over that they are the wrong hands to entrust with that kind of responsibility, and the Snow White remake is another great example of that.
Oh, there's a big surprise! That's an incredible... I think I'm gonna have a heart attack and die from that surprise!
To me, this movie quite literally felt like Disney wanting to have its cake and eat it too. Yes, a lot of the things that people will remember about the original Snow White story are still present here in the remake. And I've always personally been of the opinion that the best remakes take the base of the original film and take it in a completely different direction. The problem with Disney's approach in a movie like Snow White is that the changes that they made did not improve the story. The changes don't even make the story more interesting. They all feel very skin deep, which is kind of ironic when you consider the overall message of this film. If we look at just the character of Snow White for a moment, based on what we see in this movie, you can kind of tell that the studio thinks Snow White is a shallow, unrelatable character, and they thought they needed to add depth to her in order for modern audiences to connect with her. The problem is that the major change that they make to her character arc actually ends up making her feel more cliche than anything. I mean, we've seen the tired trope of someone trying to regain their rightful spot and restore order to the kingdom a million times before. Whoever came up with the concept that that was going to be the thing that drives her in this film, and not true love, clearly does not understand the purpose of this story to begin with. And as far as the true love thing goes, I will give them credit for not cutting that out of the film completely, but its significance is greatly diminished. Also, as predicted by many people, including myself, the fairest of them all line from the original film kind of takes on a new meaning in the remake. In the remake, it's referencing more inner beauty, which is a much more modern concept.
My teacher tells me real beauty's on the inside.
That's just something ugly people say.
But the way that they deliver that message, along with all of the oppression talk during the Queen's rule, it all comes off as very ham-fisted, very clunky, and yes, even heavy-handed. It was very clear to me early on that the main goal of this remake was not to reinvent the wheel necessarily. It was to make changes to the very fundamentals of why this story exists. And that is a risky proposition. So that creates a situation where you have to ask the question, why not just come up with an original story instead of trying to change this story into something that it is not? As far as the performances go, when it comes to the two leads, that being Rachel Zegler and Gal Gadot, I couldn't escape this feeling that they both were severely miscast. I think Zegler does fine in her performance, and it's clear to me that she has a very good singing voice. The biggest issue for me with her in this film is that sometimes it feels like she was plucked out of another movie and just randomly dropped into this one. She kind of feels out of place. She also makes kind of strange facial expressions when she is singing and sometimes even when she's acting. And I don't really know how to describe it. It's almost like she's uncomfortable or something. But it was very distracting to me. A couple of times I felt like she was possessed by the kid from The Grudge or something.
Whistle while you work.
And as far as Gal Gadot goes, yes, she also feels out of place in this film as well. I don't know if it was the dialogue or the delivery of that dialogue, but I just was never sold on the idea of her being the evil queen. To me, she just wasn't menacing in any way, and I never really took her seriously as a credible threat.
But you one crazy ass bitch.
And then we have the 7 dwarves, and oh my god, did they drop the ball on this one. In addition to there being way too much CGI in this movie overall anyway, they kind of infamously made the decision to not use real actors with dwarvism in these roles, and instead create them completely with CGI. It was definitely a choice after that initial backlash, but let this be a lesson to creators out there: never compromise your vision in order to please some randos on the internet, because it's never going to work. I mean, the dwarves in the original story are known for very obviously having 7 distinct personalities, but they just felt so lifeless to me in this remake, and that has everything to do with the way in which they were brought to life. As far as the musical numbers go, the 2 most recognizable songs in the film are present and accounted for, and the rest of the songs, the newer songs, were about as forgettable as you can imagine. As far as the general look of the film goes, it's that typical modern visual style where everything looks fake. It's the kind of thing that does not allow you as an audience member to get fully immersed in the story that they are trying to tell. The Snow White remake feels like it's somewhere in between trying to honor the classic and also trying to improve it, and it really doesn't do a good job of either. It doesn't really have its own identity to justify its existence. It very much comes off as a lifeless, less magical version of the original film.
Weird.
Here's something to consider. The original film from 1937 is about 45 minutes shorter, and to me a much more polished and streamlined experience. As a filmmaker, if you feel like you need to add unnecessary things to a story just to pad the runtime, then there's a good chance that that is not going to turn out the way that you think it will. And it's very clear to me that some stories just aren't meant to be expanded on. There's a reason that the original film is considered iconic and timeless, and that's because it was perfect the first time. Listen, kids, little girls, people who don't know the difference will probably be able to find some enjoyment in this movie. As far as everyone else, if you've seen the original, you've already seen this story done in a much more satisfying way cinematically, which further makes the existence of this remake seem unnecessary and lazy. Snow White 2025 made me feel next to nothing while watching it, and that's exactly why it's going to be getting the Careless Sam Gerard.
I don't care!
Y'all be cool. Right on.